everyone, and welcome to Crime in Court. This is day 16 testimony recap of the trial of Richard Allen, Indiana versus Richard Allen. And there were some really big bombs that kind of were dropped yesterday. So let's get right into it. Please hit the like button as we begin. As you know, I've been bringing you, if you've been following my videos, I've been bringing you different perspectives of different reporters that are boots on the ground. So I try to mix it up. So today I have Kyla Russell of Wish News. Here's her tweets. She says, update number one from day 16 of the Delphi double homicide trial. I am again splitting this up into a few posts. Click the link below for more in the live blog. All right, so the day started with an objection from the state in reference to a defense witness that was later called Dr. Stuart Gracian. So the state objected to this expert, but Judge Gull eventually let him testify. So the prosecution wanted to limit Gracian's testimony as they were worried that he would speak to the guilt or innocence of Allen. Gull agreed to let him testify, but said he must stick within the bounds and not speak to Allen's innocence or guilt. Before Gracian was called, Betsy Blair was called again. Blair testified for the state earlier on the trial, or earlier on in the trial. As you may remember, she is the one who identified and gave the description for the sketch number two of the younger man that she saw, not the older gentleman that there was Sarah Carbow who saw, she was driving by and saw someone walking on County North Road there. And that was a totally different description. That was the first, Sarah Carbob was the first sketch. Betsy Blair was the second sketch that was released to the public. And this is now, she's being called by the defense. She she was asked a series of questions and said again that she saw Bridge Guy on February 13 on the Monon High Bridge. She said there was a car backed into a spot at the CPS building. She said it looked like a 1965 Ford Comet. She said it was not a bright color. This is important. Um, Her knowledge of this car and what it looks like. Her father owned a Ford Comet, 1965 Ford Comet. So that is what it reminded her of. I don't know why that wasn't reported, but she said it um, on the stand earlier, but then why would they call her back? I don't know. But she definitely, I've heard, she has said that her father owned this kind of car when she was younger, so she was easily able to identify the car and she recognized it, but she couldn't recognize, or she doesn't remember the color. She didn't know the color. She just knew it was not a bright color and it wasn't black. Baldwin showed her a transcript from a conversation she had with law enforcement in 2019 where she said the car couldn't have been black. So it wasn't a black car, it wasn't a bright colored car, and it wasn't a Ford Focus. That's for sure. So she knew that. Right, the prosecution then said that Blair was later shown a photo of the car not parked far off the road on that day during a similar time. Blair said she was positive the car that she saw was parked at the CPS building. She so I guess there's some question as to whether it was parked far off the road or at the CPS building, but she's um, positive that it was parked there at the CPS building. She also confirmed, and this is an abandoned building, so it's noticeable when there's cars there. She also confirms to the jury that the CPS building was abandoned and she didn't believe the car could have belonged to someone inside. So there you go. The state then called Gracian. He focuses on the mentality of solitary confinement. This dude is a very well qualified expert on solitary confinement and the effects of your psyche and your mental health and what solitary confinement can do to this can happen to anybody, not just someone that already has pre-existing mental health conditions. So anyone who goes into solitary confinement for, let's say, 15 to 30 days or more, you might start to experience some of the symptoms of solitary confinement, which would be confusion, isolation, loneliness, depression, anxiety, a lot of the things that Richard Allen was exhibiting. So let's continue on to see what he says. He reviewed Grossian, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, that's correct. Okay. They have a data expert later on, so I got confused there. So he reviewed Allen's phone calls, videos from incarceration, and various transcripts in his assessment of Allen. He did not go to Westville in person at any point. So he's really just looking at the overall case information that he has on Allen. He determined solitary confinement was a toxic environment for Allen. He explained that false memories are, he said his, he explained what false memories are. Sorry. He explained what false memories are. He said his focus was simply determining if Allen's conditions were causing him to deteriorate. And the next update here, update number 2 from Delphi, day 16. The defense then called Dr. Eric Warren, who is a forensic consultant with a specialty in tool mark analysis. The defense retained him to review the work done by Melissa Oberg. Melissa Oberg is the one who said that she couldn't identify the cartridge found at the scene to a cartridge cycled through Allen's gun. However, when she fired the cartridge, then she got the same impressions, which is definitely comparing apples to oranges. You are not at all doing the same thing. So your comparison shouldn't even have come into trial, in my opinion. All right, so he examines Melissa Oberg's work on the unspent cartridge found at the scene. He explained the level of criticism his industry faces. So as I've said on multiple occasions on my channel, this is junk science. Determining uh, these striation marks or whatever that these experts are looking at and trying to determine if they match on tool markings, on firearms. Uh, it's been widely scrutinized in the public. There was a metallurgist that the defense wanted to call that could actually really talk about that, but Judge Gold denied him coming into trial because the state objected to him. So basically, throughout the manufacturing process, you get a lot of the same marks from the machinery. So you cannot definitively say this came from the machinery and this came from the gun. You have no idea. And a lot of the markings can be similar because it is cutting the material at the same spots and doing, whatever it does. And also I learned that the pieces for the guns and the ammo, like they can be manufactured in different places and then put together somewhere else. So there are multiple ways in which these tool markings can occur on these cartridges, and it just isn't an accurate science. So um, there's that. All right, so where was I here? The defense retained him, blah blah blah. He explained the level of criticism. He said that due to Oberg's way of testing, the comparison was not done correctly. For at least the photo comparison, Oberg tested a round that had been fired next to the cartridge found at the scene that had only been cycled through a firearm. So again, comparing apples to oranges. One's fired, one's not. So how can we even compare? Oberg said firing it only makes the same markings more prominent due to more pressure. I don't think she's correct on that. She said the markings on the two cartridges were in sufficient agreement. They were in sufficient agreement, meaning they were matches, not insufficient. One word. So the cross by Luttrell was testy, apparently. So Luttrell is the prosecuting attorney, and he pointed out that Warren had not looked at the evidence himself, but had simply reviewed her work. So that's correct. This particular expert wasn't hired to look at anything else or to do any of his own testing. He was hired to review Melissa Oberg's evaluation. So that was what he was hired to do. But Luttrell was trying to make that like an issue. And, I'm sure if they had had money and time and all the resources in the world, they probably would have had it tested. But really do what you can do with what you've got. All right, so update number 3, and this is the final update from Kyla. She says, after lunch, the state called digital forensic examiner Stacy Eldridge, who worked at the FBI for about 10 years and was at one point a senior examiner and digital evidence instructor. Eldridge was hired by the defense to look at the several reports on extractions made by investigators on Libby's phone. So now we're getting into the data, the forensics of the phone. She said that it would be helpful if the power log for the phone still existed. She said Libby's phone connected to a cell tower for the last time at 5:44 p.m. on February 13th, and not again until 4:33 a.m. on February 14th. She didn't have a reason for why this would be the case other than a blocked signal. At 5:45 p.m., audio is outputting from the phone. Eldridge says headphones. So this is at a time when we are told that, the girls are already gone. The state's theory is that the girls' lives were taken sometime between that 2:30, 3 o'clock time in order for it to fit the timeline and all the people that supposedly, all the eyewitnesses that saw him that day. This is um, kind of refuting that, isn't it? By saying that Libby's phone was ringing at 5:54. So this is what they said on the stand was that it was almost like her phone rang and almost immediately somebody plugged in like an audio device. This would be an old phone where you actually had a separate port for your earbuds and or wired headphones. We didn't really use earbuds back then as much, I guess. So it would have been like a wired headphone that you could just plug right in, or it could even be like an auxiliary, she said, an auxiliary cord, like connecting it to a car or speaker or something. But regardless, we know it was plugged into something that silenced the ringing at that moment. And it wasn't unplugged until 10:32. So let me read it word for word here. So she said that Libby's phone connected to a cell tower for the last time at 5:44 p.m. on February 13th and then not again until 4:33 a.m. She didn't have a reason for why this could be. At 5:45 p.m., audio is outputting from the phone. Eldridge says headphones or some sort of auxiliary cord was plugged into the phone until 10:32 p.m. that night. So from 5:44, this is not like a charger. It is definitely an auxiliary cord or wired headphones, something of that nature, or plugging it into a speaker of some sort or whatever. So, from 5:45 to 10:32, and we are told again 2:30 something that the girls are pretty much almost immediately abducted and taken. Eldridge showed the jury how wired headphones are plugged into a phone, an iPhone 6S, so that she used a sample from that particular phone that Libby was using at the time. Eldridge later explained how the act of plugging the headphones in still may not have caused the Apple Health data to track movement. The defense then called ISP Fire Sergeant Chris Cecil, who extracted most of the data from Libby's phone. He admitted he had not heard of the headphone theory and said that he Googled if dirt or water could have had the same impact on the phone. He said Google said yes. So I'm supposed to just trust this guy who Googled something when we've got, and he's the one that was part of the original, was he the phone extraction guy? He might have been, because that name's familiar. I recognize him from testifying earlier. So the expert Eldridge says it could have been, or it's definitely this kind of cord, but this guy says it could have been dirt. Okay, I don't buy that, but we'll see. The defense and Cecil went back and forth on his use of Google. Yeah, because I would be like, Google's not a reliable, credible expertise source. Um, so the defense then called Brian Bunner. Bunner did the very first data extraction from Libby's phone. He said he did not search anything during the break and also said he had not heard of the headphone theory. So these are multiple, Cecil and Bunner are multiple state witnesses who had something to do with the extraction of Libby's phone originally, and so the defense is bringing them back basically to drive home the fact that they didn't do their due diligence. They're not experts in this. We have our expert, and these guys kind of screwed up and didn't look at everything. And this is just one of Kyla's ex tweets from just reiterating the whole wired headphone thing. So, a former FBI digital evidence instructor testifies for the defense and says she believes wired headphones or some sort of auxiliary cord was plugged into Libby German's phone between 5:45 p.m. to 10:32 p.m. that same day. And then we know the next activity on the phone is at 4:33 in the morning when a bunch of pings and messages and things start to happen at her phone all at once at 4:30 in the morning. It just doesn't make sense. All right, let's read this version now. This is Fox 59. This is a concerted effort between Matt Adams, Max Lewis, and Russ McQuaid. They uh, did a morning and afternoon recap that we will go through. Let me make it a little bigger. My eyes suck. All right, so this is the Delphi homicides. Defense experts testify on solitary confinement impact and the unspent bullet evidence. So the defense again focused on Richard Allen's mental health while in custody and attempted to cast doubt on the state's key evidence involving the unspent bullet found at the crime scene on day 16 of testimony. Allen faces 4 counts of homicide in the February 2017 deaths of Abby Williams and Liberty German. Near the Monon High Bridge, state police announced his arrest October 2022, so almost exactly 2 years ago. On day 15, Allen's mental health was again the focus on the case, with the defense psychologist testifying that he has a long history of mental health issues. So that was Dr. Westcott, I believe, and well, we went through it. I can't remember now. That went over the extensive mental health history of Allen's. Yeah, that's right. Okay, Westcott, Dr. Westcott was a female. She told the court that she didn't believe he was faking any symptoms of his psychosis. The jurors saw additional videos of Allen in custody at Westville Correctional Facility. That was day 15. All right, so 2 of Allen's family members took the stand on Monday. The defense's the defense also called Steve Mullen. I don't know why we're getting this whole recap of Monday. Let's move on. Blair returns to the stand. The 16th day of testimony began with Betsy Blair, a February 13th, 2017 witness who took the stand earlier in the case. Blair said that she saw a car in the parking lot of the old CPS building that had been backed into its spot. She described it as an older car that was angular in shape. She drew an outline of the car for law enforcement. The drawing was admitted in evidence. Blair couldn't recall the color of the vehicle, although a transcript from April 2019 indicated that she told investigators it could not have been black. The state objected to the improper use of the transcript, which Gull sustained. Whatever. A black 2016 Ford Focus SE is registered to Allen at the center of this case. And that is what they claim is they saw his car at the scene on the Hoover Hoosier Harvest store. That's a hard one to say, guys. You really should rename that if you have anything to do with the Hoosier Harvest store. It's hard to say. All right, so a psychiatrist on solitary confinement, Dr. Stuart Gracian, next took the stand. The psychiatrist is on the faculty at Harvard Medical School and is an expert on the psychiatric impact of solitary confinement. At the beginning of Tuesday's session, the state filed a motion in limine seeking to limit Gracian's testimony. Gull ruled that he could testify as long as he didn't discuss Allen's intent, innocence, or guilt. She warned the defense that if the testimony stepped over the line, they would have a much harsher conversation. During this testimony, Gracian said defense attorneys Brad Rosie contacted him about Allen. He examined medical records, video from his time in custody, video calls, and transcripts of interviews with inmates and corrections officers. He described solitary as a lonely and toxic environment. Gracian never visited Westville Correctional Facility himself, but he did watch videos showing Allen's behavior. Jurors saw some of the same footage Saturday and Monday. So they watched again video of Allen in his cell. These were moments of him running and hitting his forehead head on the walls until he bled over and over again. These are videos of him smearing feces on himself, eating feces. Um, so I imagine that these were really difficult to watch, but it really goes to show that he may have been in a psychosis. So Grazian said, someone who spends too long in solitary will eventually become delirious and have problems with their memory. He testified that smearing feces, being naked, and acting out sexually are common. And this is important too because I don't think I've reported this, but other stations or content creators have reported that he has been repeatedly masturbating in his cell and he's been naked a lot. So all of these things track to severe psychosis. So sometimes Gracian said people will hurt or take their own lives. They'll hurt themselves or take their own lives. Allen displayed some classic signs of delirium, Gracian testified. He said false memories can be replayed over and over to the point that they almost become real. He believes this is consistent with what he saw from Allen. And I just want to say, if you've got guards or the warden or other prisoners that are standing there watching him 24/7 and constantly telling him, you did this, you're the KI double Eller, you're a baby kill, a child, whatever, and saying all those bad things, and eventually he's in this state of psychosis, he's going to believe them. And so when he's on the phone with his wife and she's like, you didn't do these things, stop admitting or stop saying you did that. He's like, I don't know, maybe I did, because his memories have been warped because of this. So it's baffling to me that any of these confessions came in, but this is where we're at. So I guess it's up to the jury to decide, were they legitimate confessions or not. In some cases, sorry, I thought I skipped. In some cases, a person in solitary confinement will begin to think they committed a crime before eventually progressing towards a full confession. Jurors asked Gracian if someone who exhibits psychotic behavior can return to normal. The psychiatrist answered in the affirmative. So, someone who is psychotic can return, they can have moments of normalcy. Another juror questioned if a normal person could become psychotic after months in solitary confinement, and he said, absolutely, I've seen it happen. So he's an expert on that, and I trust him, and I believe that Alan was showing signs of psychosis. Moving on to the bullet evidence, jurors also heard testimony from Dr. Eric Warren, a forensic consultant who specializes in tool mark analysis and crime scene reconstruction. He formerly worked for the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, but left to focus on research. Warren said that he's testified for both prosecution and defense in the past. The defense asked him to review the work of Melissa Oberg, the former Indiana State Police crime lab technician who examined a cartridge found at the homicide scene, and compare it to the Sig Sauer that was owned by Richard Allen. So Oberg's analysis found that the crime scene round had been cycled through Allen's gun. The unspent bullet is the state's key piece of physical evidence that prosecutors say links Allen to the homicides. And without that bullet and without the confessions, they got nothing. Warren reviewed the results of ISP testing of the bullet and the gun. He considered them to be an apples to oranges comparison since Oberg compared the initial round, which had been cycled, to a bullet test fired from Allen's gun. Totally two different things. I would think that the firing would change it so dramatically that it would be almost impossible to see the same marks from the first, from cycling it or whatever. Like it's so, there would be it would be also impossible to determine if you cycled a gun versus if you fired it first, or if you cycled it first before you fired it. There would be no way to determine that because I don't think that it would even. Anyways, I think you know what I mean. All right. So Oberg told the court during her testimony earlier in the trial that an ejector mark was an ejector mark, regardless of whether it was a round that was fired or cycled, which I don't agree on that, but whatever she says, that was Oberg's testimony. Warren pushed back against that assertion during his testimony. He said the lab needed to identify tool marks under the same conditions in which the bullet was found. So you have to be able to match it, repeatedly match it with multiple tests to get the same results. And she didn't do that. The lab did a dry cycle of test rounds on Allen's gun, but didn't replicate the marks on the round found at the scene. So they did do some tests to cycle the casings, and it didn't match. So they had to make up this whole, oh, but if you fire it, it matches BS. During cross-examination, the prosecution hit back at Warren, saying that he drew his conclusions based only on photographs and the report that the lab from the state lab that was provided to them. Deputy Prosecutor James Luttrell Jr. pointed out that Warren didn't ask for the cartridge found at the homicide scene or Allen's gun to do any of the testing. Warren said he didn't need either of the items to perform his analysis, demonstrating the central role the bullet plays in the trial and the importance the jury may place on the evidence. Jurors had 15 questions for Warren. That is by far the most they've had for any single witness during these proceedings. I think that is because this is such a big piece of evidence. Questions included whether cleaning or reassembling a gun would change its firing characteristics, and why Warren didn't do his own direct assessment of the unspent bullet in Allen's gun. But what was his answer? They didn't tell us. Another question asked if a direct examination by Warren would have been more conclusive. He indicated that it was possible but could have gone either way. So, a direct examination wouldn't necessarily give him the results of definitively including or excluding Allen's gun. Juror also asked some technical questions regarding cartridges and how firearms make marks on rounds and how they differ from the manufacturer marks. One juror asked if Warren was aware someone else had reviewed Oberg's findings for verification. Warren said she was aware, or he was aware, and added that was part of the process. Oberg testified she had all her findings verified. An additional question asked Warren if he was aware that the extractor on Allen's gun had a recessed area that made individual marks that matched the unspent bullet. Warren said he was unaware. He then made a comment about a lack of documentation in Oberg's report. The response led to Luttrell to laugh in court, according to media pool notes. Why was Luttrell laughing in court? I don't know, but that's all we get from that. That was the half of yesterday, day 16 we're on, right? I think. I don't even know anymore, I believe. Yeah, day 16. All right, so next, this is the second half of the day. Delphi homicides. Experts say headphone jack inserted into Libby's phone removed in the dead of the night. So, a computer analysis expert testified on Tuesday and claimed that her. Let me close that because that's going to annoy me. So she claimed that her findings revealed that a headphone jack was plugged into Libby's phone hours after it stopped moving. The jack then connected nearly 5 hours later in the dead of the night. This shocking revelation was revealed to jurors for the first time and caused a stir within the courtroom that eventually led to Special Judge Fran Gull scolding the gallery for talking. She's fun. She must be real fun at dinner parties. I wouldn't want to go to a dinner party where Judge Gull is, but she must be a hoot. All right, day 16 of testimony. I just read that. The first half of the day involved testimony about Alan's mental state and detrimental effect. We read that. Tuesday afternoon unveiled a significant development in the case as an intriguing new detail was revealed. Headphone jack manipulation. Stacey Eldridge is a former FBI forensic examiner with a degree in computer information management. She worked for the FBI for 10 years and was part of the computer analysis response team. Eldridge is also a certified mobile device examiner and a licensed private detective in Nebraska. The defense called Eldridge to the stand on Tuesday after asking her to analyze the data that state police pulled from Libby German's cell phone. State police experts Brian Bunner and Chris Cecil previously presented this data to jurors, laying out the timeline for the phone's movements, along with showing video and audio extracted from the phone, including the bridge guy video, the photo of Abby that was actually never found in the phone, the one of Abby on the bridge solo. I think I talked about that before. It was not found in her extraction, but it was posted on her Snapchat. So it's just very odd. Very odd things were happening, and there's not explanations from the state. So it doesn't make sense to me still, their theory. Eldridge's testimony agreed with several aspects of the state police findings, though she criticized them for not doing a better job of extracting data from Libby's phone, which could have led to better findings. There's something about, like they did one extraction, one and done, but she said you need to do multiple extractions. You have to do it from different software, different devices, try it multiple ways because you can get different things to come up and whatnots. So her criticism, I believe, was that they didn't try to get multiple extractions or do all they could to get the fullest data from her phone. So, a key piece of missing evidence included a power log. Power logs reveal when a phone was last turned off or on. So, we don't have that, so we can't tell if it was turned off, if it was put in some kind of device or bag or something to stop cell from being from it's just to stop the phone from receiving cell signal. It's possible. There's a thing called a Faraday bag. You use like you could put it in your microwave and it won't receive um, signal from your provider because you're cutting off that um, uh, ability to receive it, the receptor in your phone. If you put it in like a foil or a Faraday bag, some kind of something like that. I've heard even like a chip bag that's lined with foil. If you put your phone in a chip bag like that, you can also block signal of your phone. I'm not saying that's what happened here. I'm just saying it's a possibility because we don't have an explanation. We don't have the on off. We don't have an explanation as to why it stopped moving, but there's activity that's going on after it stopped moving. And we want to know, and why did it stop pinging to the um, towers? It's all very suspicious. So she stated that every time a phone is turned on or off, it loses some of its data. And the state had to turn the phone. They turned the phone on when they got it, and they turned it on and off a couple times, I think, during their extractions while it was sitting in evidence. While Eldridge stated she generally agreed with the timeline laid out by Cecil's ping data of Libby's phone, she did disagree with some of the findings, including when the phone last connected to service and last received messages. Eldridge said her analysis of the findings led her to the conclusion that the phone last connected to a cell tower at 5:44 p.m. on February 13th. This is a little over 3 hours and some minutes. I don't know, 3 hours after Libby's phone quit moving. That's not right because it stopped moving it did stop moving somewhere around like the 2:30, 3 o'clock mark. So yeah, I guess that would make sense. 3 hours. Okay. So the phone then connected again in the early morning of 4:33 a.m. This is when police said Libby's phone received several messages sent 12 hours or more prior. So 4:30 in the afternoon, these were being sent to her phone, like the one from her grandma saying, contact me now." Um, these all came into her phone around 4:30 in the morning, all at once, including frantic family members trying to contact her. So, text messages and messages from her family and friends. So, Eldridge said that data shows that after 5:44 p.m., the phone attempted to reconnect to the tower and that no data was being used by any apps between 5:44 and 4:33. Could there be someone who knew something about phones in this little Odinist circle? Perhaps a law enforcement officer, maybe someone in Unified Command, maybe. I don't know. Um, but yeah, could someone have had a why is my hold on. This website is the problem, I think. Give me 1 second. All right, let's see if that's better. I noticed my video was lagging, and I think it's because this website has a bunch of pop-up windows or ads that are being stupid. All right. So where was I? Sorry for the interruption. Eldridge said that the data shows that after 5, the phone attempted to reconnect to the tower. Yeah, so did Unified Command or someone who has knowledge in phones have something to do with somehow disconnecting all the apps to the signal to the tower. They did something maybe to Libby's phone and then deleted that or didn't allow that to come up on the, I don't know, something. Something is fishy and it's just not sitting right with me. And I feel like there might be more to this. And I really do have a feeling that law enforcement is part of this odinous circle that is doing the things that they were doing to these poor girls. The defense team asked if Eldridge could provide an explanation for why the phone stopped receiving signal during the near 11-hour gap if the phone was stationary, as the prosecution has claimed. Eldridge said she had no explanation outside of movement of the phone or the signal being blocked. So, exactly. There's no other explanation. The signal's being blocked somehow, or it's moving outside of the area, but the phone's not moving. So, how is it moving outside of the area? And we know Brad Weber, who lives there, and Ron Logan, who lives around there, have cell signal. Like the people that live there know they all have cell signal. I don't. We've seen, I think, Ron Logan on his phone in one of the interviews that he was doing, or that one of the news stations was trying to get. So we know cell signal works out there. So I don't know why. And really, somebody should go test. Somebody in the defense, go test that. Test your cell phone signal and see if there is signal there in the area where the girls were found, because that could help eliminate some of the confusion there. All right, so, anyways, the biggest takeaway from Eldridge's finding was that while the phone was not logging any data due to the lack of signal, it still logged mechanical manipulation. So somebody was doing something with that phone, even though everything else was not logging. There was stuff going on behind the scene. So at 5:45 p.m. on February 13th, Eldridge said a phone call came into Libby's phone and that within milliseconds, a headphone jack was inserted into the phone. So basically, as it was ringing, headphone jack, something gets plugged into it. By plugging in the cable, you would stop sound, Eldridge points out. So maybe the girls were abducted. If Libby still had her phone but didn't have a chance to talk on her phone and answer it, maybe she was, but then she would have texted, I think. I don't know. It's hard to say. Maybe she didn't. I don't think it was Libby who plugged her phone, the headphones in. I think it was probably the perpetrators. But it's still a possibility that Libby could have done it. But then it begs the question, if she had her phone, then why didn't she communicate? But maybe she couldn't. Maybe she was, I don't know. I don't know. I really do believe that they were abducted and taken somewhere, and they waited until the search ended to bring them back to that area. All right, so according to Eldridge's findings, the headphone jack was removed from Libby's phone nearly 5 hours later at 10:32 p.m. So for 5 hours, that thing was plugged in. Doesn't make sense to me. A former fire chief previously spoke about the frantic nighttime search for the girls that began at around 9:30, 10 p.m. and lasted until 2:30 and turned up no sign of the girls. So remember, they did search that area. There were people searching on both sides, I believe, of the creek, and yet no one found them. No one heard the phones ringing, so maybe it wasn't an effort to silence them. Maybe they were being held somewhere nearby, maybe at Brad Weber's house or Ron Logan's house, for instance, which were right where the girls were found. So it makes more sense, the things that I'm saying, than this just random CVS worker who just happened to be walking along the trail that day and did this gruesome thing. I mean, I buy the Odinist stuff. I realize that there's evils out there that we don't understand or know about that people are hiding from us. And if it got out, it'd be really bad for the people in charge, which is why I believe Unified Command has something to do with this. Whether they were there and participated or whether they are part of these clans or whatever you call them, groups, these Vinlander groups, Odinist groups that maybe he doesn't have to get his hands dirty, but other people do it for him. So he knows about it and all he has to do is cover it up. I don't know. He might be benefiting from that way. He, and by he, I mean them. Sorry, I should have said that. I'm like in my mind, I'm thinking Doug Carter because I think he has something to do with it, but definitely Jerry Holman, possibly even Steve Mullen. They all could be potentially corrupt, especially in this case when we have what's going on here and just blatant abuse of the system, abuse of prosecutorial power. And it's so scary that this can be happening in our country right now. Yeah, she says there's no explanation that doesn't involve a human interaction. So now, cross examination, McLeland was quick to question Eldridge's expertise, pointing out that she's had no cell phone extraction training between 2009 and 2024. She also has never testified about cell phone extractions until she did so in July for the first time. Everybody starts somewhere, and it doesn't mean that she's not an expert in what she does, just means she hasn't testified about it a lot. So Eldridge conceded that she didn't have a chance to review all of Cecil's data and cell phone findings. She agreed with the timestamps on the videos and photos, and that she lost logged movement of the phone. The lost logged movement of the phone was at 2:32 p.m., but did not agree that it meant it was the last time the phone moved. Okay, so within the information that they do have, they see that the last time the phone moved, according to the data that they have, is 2:32. But she's saying it could have been past that time, but we might have lost that data. So she can't rule that out. She conceded she didn't know the service in the area of Deer Creek and that it is possible the phone just stopped going in and out of service, which I find highly not credible because then if it was going in and out of service, wouldn't her pings have been coming in? Wouldn't those text messages have been coming in at certain times? What happened to them happened between the hours of 2:30 and 4:30 when that phone pinged again and the search stopped. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. McLeland asked if plugging in a headphone would have made the phone log a movement. She said it could not. So, when asked if someone picked up the phone and carried the phone through the woods, would it log movement? She said yes, unless someone was doing something to block that, I would think. Aldridge also conceded that she found no data suggesting the phone was ever turned off. The jurors asked several follow-up questions that might have been lost in the lost information there. The jurors asked several questions to Eldridge, including if she ever wrote her timeline of Libby's phone. She said no, adding that she had limited time. Jurors asked if she could tell if Libby's phone was on silent or set to vibrate. Eldridge said she didn't know. Jurors also asked if water or moisture in the phone could register as movement. She said she did not know. Those aren't good answers. The state police returned. Cecil and Bunner briefly returned to the stand after Eldridge stepped down as the defense sought to push on their lack of reporting the headphone jack. So Cecil stated he Googled the juror's question about water or moisture on the phone during break and read that the headphone jack. So he was in the room apparently listening to, um, what's her name? Eldridge's testimony because he Googled while on break just now. While on break, he goes and Googles about the water moisture if it would show that the phone jack had registered, and he said that it did. And then the defense asked, "Do you normally Google search when conducting research in a criminal investigation?" And he said, "Not normally, no." So Google's probably not your best source of information. "You normally look at peer-reviewed articles, right?" He says that's correct. Well, now I wonder if that is true because he's just Googling it and giving that on the stand as his expertise in it. Cecil was asked if he examined Libby's phone for water damage. He said he did not. He asked if dirt was on the phone when it was found. He said he did not know. So we don't know if it was wet. We don't know if there was dirt, but you're saying that dirt or water could have done it. So, okay, but we have no proof that either of those things were on Libby's phone. So there you go. It should be noted the phone was found under a shoe that was under Abby's body. Bunner's questioning was even briefer. He was asked if he knew what audio output meant. He said no. He was asked if he did any Google searches during the break, and he said no. So he might have been in the gallery too, watching as Eldridge testified, perhaps. But it doesn't matter because it really didn't help him at all. Um, but I don't like that they were sitting in and listening, especially Cecil, because he kind of pushed back on that and went and did his own Google search, which that's not reliable. Anyways, what do you guys think? This, by the way, is going to be the end because spoiler alert. Um, on Tuesday, November 6th, the defense is going to rest right at the very beginning of the day. So I'm not giving you any news that you're not going to find out throughout between watching this video and tomorrow. So they are going to be um, going over jury instructions. I know that the state is going to put on a rebuttal case. They believe that they are waiting on rebuttal witnesses right now. Judge Gull has to go over, finalize her jury instructions, and then review them with the defense and the prosecution, and then make any recommended changes from there. And then we'll probably hear closing arguments. Maybe not today. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe Friday. Right? Tomorrow's Thursday. Yeah. So we shall see. Hopefully, this gets wrapped up and the jury can see through a lot of this BS and they're not like inherently trusting the government and the prosecutors and the judge and all that. But that is what people do most of the time. You just trust law enforcement. You don't expect that they're going to come in and lie on the stand, but it happens all the time. And it's scary and it's infuriating. It's isolating for someone who is the person being railroaded and having to suffer severe psychosis because the state got it wrong, or rather they couldn't get it right in the first place, so then they arrest an innocent man and frame him. That's what it looks like to me. And maybe they didn't have the intention of framing him in the beginning. Maybe they really thought that he might have done it. I don't think so, if they're being honest with themselves, but they eventually made their pieces of evidence fit. And really, they had no evidence. And everything that they had was basically refuted by the defense experts and witnesses. But I guess that's for a jury to decide. What do you guys think? Now that we've gone through everything, this is the testimony, pretty much. We're missing rebuttal and closing, but that's about it. Would you convict Richard Allen based on what you know so far? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you guys in day 17 video and update you on what's next throughout the process. Thank you so much